Welcome to another Triple T Thursday. For those just joining us, that's Tools, Tips, and Talk, where we'll discuss info for the knife maker. In today's episode, by popular demand, we're going to talk about hot salts and the process of doing hot bluing or hot blackening on your parts. Let's go take a look. First, let's talk about the equipment you're going to need. So it's not a lot of complex equipment. First thing, you're going to need something to clean the parts and dip the parts. So just some various little containers, plastic containers to hold some of the cleaning solutions and things like that. And I have this, well, it's just a little coat hanger piece that I can put parts on and kind of sit them and hang them over the side of the pot here. To contain the salts, I just went to Walmart and bought this stainless steel pot and that has a lid, so you're going to need that. Some safety equipment. These salts are very caustic and very hot. We'll get into the different types here. So you're going to need some gloves. I just use welding gloves. You're definitely going to need a ventilator. So a mask here for that. Also, you're going to need a heat source to heat up these things. I just use this, it's like from a turkey fryer, but it's really high BTUs, so you're going to want this, especially for the bluing salts, which have to get up to a much higher temperature. And then you can dial the reg on this, so really good piece of equipment, and I'll put links to this down in the description. The other thing you're going to need that is absolutely essential is a temperature gauge with a thermocouple that will handle the kind of temperatures in here. This one obviously has seen better days and got a bunch of salt on it, but this is nice because you can actually plug two probes into this if you needed to. And measure two different things. So, but you could just have this hanging in your salt bath, and it will tell you the temperature. And I think this thing is good up to like 1,000 degrees or something like that. You definitely need this. So let's talk about the different kinds of salts. So there's really two main salts that we're going to talk about. One is the high temp salts. That's this stuff, this white stuff at the bottom here. This is niter blue, and I don't have the original packaging or anything like that, but I'll put a link or a picture down in the corner, and there'll be links to all this stuff. Niter blue is a high temp salt, meaning this is going to be a pure salt bath. We're going to put really high temperatures. We're actually going to melt this salt. This will go up to 680 degrees, so it gets really hot. This one is much more dangerous than the other salt we're going to talk about, and this is the one that's actually capable of turning parts blue or purple, depending on the temperature. And varying the temperature by 10 degrees will change the color of your part. So that's why you need the thermocouple. And you need to be able to regulate the temperature here with something like this to maintain a steady temperature, because you need to immerse the parts for a good 10 minutes, and you want that temperature to stabilize so that you get the color you're looking for. And we're gonna actually fire this up, and you'll see. The dangerous part of this is there's no water mixed with this salt. Okay, it's pure liquid salt. And the problem with liquid salt is when it's 650 degrees, if you even put a drop of water, like a single drop of water in this, it will basically evaporate immediately, causing this to violently erupt, and it'll pop and spark, but it'll pop. And if anything were to fall into this, or you accidentally spill more than a drop of water, this will basically erupt in your face. So that's why it's very dangerous. You need to make sure that nothing is going to fall in this. The parts that you put into this must be completely dry. You must use compressed air and blow them off before you put them in the salts. the last thing you want is 650 degree salt to spray all over you. So this one is much more dangerous, and I'm much more cautious when I'm doing this stuff. So the other salt we're going to talk about is hot blackening salts. You can tell it's quite a bit messier. But the nice part about the hot blackening salts is it's a much lower temperature. This stuff only needs to go to about 280, 290 degrees. So you could actually hot blacken a blade in here because you're not going to ruin your temper. As opposed to this, where it's 650 degrees, you're obviously going to ruin any temper, so you cannot do this process on a blade. This one you could. I typically use it for fittings mostly, and to blacken things, and things come out very, very nice and black. And I'll go over the chemical actually used here. But this is salt that's mixed with water, and the tough part here, this one you just need to maintain heat. There's nothing really complicated about it. It doesn't boil. It just looks like simmering water kind of thing in here, and it doesn't even really boil because it's salt. This one, you need to get it to a rolling boil. And because there's water in it, that water will steam off of it, so you continually have to be adding water and getting the level right. If you burn off too much water, then it stops boiling because the concentration of salt is too high. And so this one is a little more finicky to get right, but it's obviously a different process, and this is for blackening, but this is the one I use more often because I like the black parts. You don't blue things very often. But once you get used to it, it's a great process. Both of these must be done outside, okay? In a well-ventilated area outside. You don't want any machinery beside it. Like you do not want to do this right beside your mill because just the fumes that come off of these will corrode metal. Okay, this is hot oxidizing salt. It is for oxidizing metal. Don't do this beside any kind of metal that you care about because it will corrode it. That's what it's for. So make sure you do this outside. Do not do this in your shop. Okay, you will ruin any kind of metal that's around it. And breathing in these salts is really not good for you. So do it outside in a ventilated area. Doing this process is also a little more complicated because there's actually a cleaning solution. You need to immerse the parts in the cleaning solution for a good 10 minutes. And that way it kind of gets all the grease and grime off of them, and then you immerse them in the rolling boiling salt. This one is actually this Ultra Black 400 from EPI, Electrochemical Products Inc. In Wisconsin. Great product. This is the one I use. Parts come out super black, ultra black. The associated cleaner here from them is this eClean SR102E. That's the matching cleaner for this product. I think, actually before I say it, I'm going to look up the stats on what the mixture, this is the concentrated stuff. I think it's a 10-to-1 mix, but I'm going to look it up and let you guys know. Same with this. Okay, I looked up the ratios here. The Ultra Black 400, this particular one is 5 3/4 pounds per gallon. I think that's exactly what I mixed in here. So you weigh this out, 5 3/4 pounds, and add a gallon of water. The eClean has got a really complicated. If you read the instructions here, it's got this, titration process. And then I talked to them, and you really can just mix this like 10-to-1, 15-to-1, this stuff to water, to distilled water, and you're fine. And just use that. So one of these makes like a large volume of your cleaner, and you can just reuse this stuff. So we're going to start with the process for the bluing salts. and I'll take you through that. And I'm going to use a couple of little test pieces of 1095, and actually I might even I'll just use mild steel. There's no reason to use high carbon. I'll use a bit of mild steel, and we'll take you through the process. I am going to sand those things to probably at least about 800, and I'm going to buff them. You get a much better finish if you buff the parts, and you get them as high a grit finish as you want. I usually go to 1,000, so maybe I'll just take these a belt finish to 1,000 and then buff them, and that should be good enough for this test, and you'll see what the finish looks like. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so I've ground 2 little pieces of mild steel up to 1,000 grit just on the belt grinder. So now I'm just going to use some acetone and clean them up, get any kind of schmutz. Oh, I've also buffed them on the buffer, so there's a little buffing schmutz on it. So I'm going to wash these off as best I can. You'll notice I'm wearing gloves just to also help with making sure I don't get any fingerprints or grease from my hands on them. So the first thing I'm going to do is prop that there. I'm going to do the hot salts on this one. So this one I'm going to clean, but this one is going to get immersed into the cleaning solution when we do the hot blackening. So we're just going to put this one on hold for now. So I'm going to start heating up the salts. Then I'm going to use compressed air and just blow this off before it goes in to make sure it's super dry. But let's go heat up the salts. Okay, I'm ready to get this going. I've got the bluing salts all set up. It's just a hard brick right now, but it'll melt. Now we're ready to get this started. It's kind of a windy day, so I need to get this kind of high. Once it starts to melt, I'll put the thermocouple in it. So I've looked up the chart for niter blue, and we're going to go for a full blue color. But according to this, it's 560 degrees. The key here is to make sure that it's stabilized. So you need to bring it up to that temperature and then play with the fuel so that it maintains that temperature. Because if you just get it, well, oh, it's at 560, but you still got the flame on full blast, it'll actually surpass that. So you need to get it to steady that temperature for a good 5 minutes. Here you can see that the salt is starting to melt. It's just got a little pool on the top. When you first do this, you'll have like granules of salt, but since I've melted it a couple times, it dries into a block. But that's what it's going to look like. So most of the salt is melted now. I've put in the thermocouple. You can see the wire that's just hanging off, and I like to pull the pot over just so that the flame's not hitting up on directly on the thermocouple. But we're at 396 degrees, so a little ways to go. So it's hovering right around 560, so that's about the temp that I want, 560, 565. I've already blown this dry with compressed air after doing the acetone. Now we're ready to dip it. It'll stay in there for about 5 or 10 minutes.
The hot salts are a little deceiving because they don't look that hot because they're not boiling. But trust me, if a drop of water goes in it, you'll know about it.
Okay, it's been almost 10 minutes. I think we have the color that we want. You can pull them out and check every once in a while. So it's kind of a bluey, purpley color. So I'm going to pull them out of the salts. I have hot water here that I'm going to use as a rinse. And then they will go into some oil. We'll talk about that step. This may sputter. Okay, we've got the blued piece sitting in some mineral oil. I'll show you that after. Now we're going to move on to the hot blackening. So what we've got here is this piece.
we're going to put it in the cleaner. So I've already pre-mixed the cleaner, put it in here, and now it's just going to sit in the cleaner for about 5 minutes at least, probably 10 minutes in the cleaner, and then directly from the cleaner it's going to go in the hot salts. So let's go over and start heating up those salts, and I'll show you how to do it. So we've got the hot blackening salts set up. I've already had a batch here, so I'm just going to turn them on. I've already measured those previously and added the right amount of water. So we're starting to heat this up. This one's a little trickier to get at the right temperature. So we want this at about 280, 285 maybe. It should not go above 300. So we're going to watch it carefully and watch the thermocouple and make sure we get it right around 280. And it should be at a rolling boil. If it's not at a rolling boil, you probably don't have enough water in it. We're at about 175 degrees, and you can see it's just now starting to boil on the edges. So it'll get there. We got another 100 degrees to go. So that is exactly what we're looking for, that rolling boil. And it's right at about 290 degrees. I just turned the temp down a little bit because it was a little high. You just got to play with it, get that rolling boil, and be around 285. And remember, you're going to be burning off water, so once in a while you may have to add water, so do it very carefully. I use that little Dixie cup that's down there and just add one little cup at a time with a glove on, because sometimes it can come up on you. So my part has been soaking in the cleaning solution the whole time this has been heating up. I'd like it a little more of a boil than that, so I'm going to let it go just a couple more minutes. So now that it's in there, it's going to go for about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to add a little more water here because I can see I don't quite have a rolling boil and I'm approaching 300. Okay, you need to be very careful when you do this, folks. So it'll take a minute for it to heat back up. Yeah, so this enables me to get a rolling boil at a lower temperature. Okay, I think we're ready to call it. It's been 15 minutes. So I'm going to turn off the burner and I'm going to take the parts out, immerse them in cold water this time. Okay, let's look at our parts. First, the blue one. Let me just take some of this oil off so you guys will be able to see it a little better. The only reason I'm wearing gloves right now is just because I have dirty fingers and it'd be easier for you guys to see it. So this one was kind of, if you guys can see that, it's kind of between a purple, if I can get the camera to focus, it's kind of a purpley blue. What I didn't, I find the bluing a little trickier. And what I forgot to do is as soon as it's immersed in the oil, it will form bubbles all over it. And you need to shake those off. And I didn't do that. So I think that's when I got kind of an uneven color. But the great thing about this is once you do these parts, if you don't get the color you want, just buff it. Just buff it again with some, whatever, white buffing compound. It doesn't really matter. You'll take this color off and then do it again. I'll put some links up in the corner here for other videos that I've done that use this process, and it just takes some practice. So I also don't think I quite got this hot enough. If I would have got it a little hotter, I probably would have got more of a blue color. All right, let's look at our black. I find this process much more predictable and easier to do. So there's the, okay, if I can get with no glare on it. It's really black. You can see it's about the same color as my gloves. So really black, and it's really durable. And the great thing about this, and you guys aren't seeing this, if I put it in some oil here, it's really shiny. Like the part comes out with with a glossy sheen on it. I mean, I know I've got oil on it, but if I take the oil off, like, it will come out with a nice glossy sheen to it, which is very, very cool. And again, I've done a bunch of projects with this effect on it. The Elven Sword, my K-bars, a bunch of them. So I really love this process. There are obviously some safety things you need to be careful of. You know, you're dealing with hot salts in the order of like almost 600 degrees here. And this one, there's just more of a propensity for boil over on this one. So you definitely have to watch both of them and be careful. But with a little bit of care, it's a great process, and you can come out with some really cool things. I've also done this blackening process with copper Damascus, because the copper doesn't really take the color. So you can actually blacken fittings, which I did on the Elven Sword. The guard on the Elven Sword was copper Damascus, and I actually did the blackening process, and the copper still came out really nice. So folks, I hope this video helped you out on an introduction to hot salts and the hot salt process. Give it a try. It'll up your game on your knives. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you on the next one.